Welcome to the Project Management Prepcast, your guide to PMP exam success. Here's your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our lesson here on the control procurement process. I'm your instructor, Cornelius Fichtner. In part 1, we saw the overview and the inputs, and now in part 2, we will cover the tools and techniques as well as the outputs and give you a review at the end of the lesson. This includes a discussion on the difference between the inspecting versus controlling tools and techniques, performance reviews, change requests, and how disputes can be managed and controlled. If you remember from part 1, when we looked at the ITTO overview, we saw that we have a large number of inputs, tools and techniques and outputs. To be precise, we have 7 tools and techniques to look at. Contract change control systems, the procurement performance reviews, inspection and audits, performance reporting, payment system, claims administration, and the records management system. And these tools and techniques of the process, they can be grouped into 2 broad categories. We call them inspecting and controlling. Of course, these are not in any way official categories, but they just make these tools and techniques easier for us to remember. And here are these 2 broad categories of inspecting and controlling. On the left-hand side, we have those that fall under inspecting. We have inspections and audits, we have the procurement performance reviews, we have performance reporting, and then on the right-hand side, those that fall under controlling, the contract change control system, the payment systems, claims administration, as well as the records management system. So let's begin with the first 3 there, the inspection tools and technique, which are inspection and audits, procurement performance reviews, and performance reporting. And when we talk about inspections and audits as a tool and technique, we specifically mean inspection of seller deliverables as well as audit of seller processes. In this tool here, inspection and audits, we look at the seller's deliverables and processes to ensure that they are according to contract. You as the buyer will perform this inspection or audit procedure as the seller executes the work. The idea is to verify that we find any weaknesses that the seller may have in their processes and in their deliverables. You may recall that in other controlling processes, we look at the planned project performance in terms of budget and schedule and compare them against the actual performance. Well, we also need to do the same thing in the control procurement process. However, here we are analyzing the agreements with our sellers and their progress against what is planned in these agreements and what they have actually done in regards to performance. A procurement performance review is therefore a structured review of the seller's progress in delivering project scope and quality within cost or schedule as compared to the contract. These procurement performance reviews may include a review of seller-prepared documentations, buyer inspections, and quality audits that are conducted during the seller's execution of the work. The goal of performing these reviews is to identify seller performance success or failures, progress on the procurement statement of work, and contract non-compliance. These reviews, they may take place during project status reviews, which would include key suppliers. And then we have performance reporting in regard to procurement. This involves the following 2 sets of activities as specified in the procurement contract, which are conducted during the execution of the project and reporting these results here. Evaluating work performance data and reports that are supplied to us by the seller and to verify compliance in the seller's work processes and deliverables. Procurement performance reporting provides management with information about how effectively the seller is fulfilling the agreed upon contractual goals and objectives. And that's it for the inspect side of our tools and technique. Now let's move on to the category of tools that allow you to actually administer or control the contract. And by controlling, administering, we mean that these tools help you to keep records, pay invoices, and generally give you a process to administer the relationship with your seller. In this category, we first have the contract change control system, which is defined in the PMBOK guide as the system used to collect, track, adjudicate and communicate changes to a contract. And by the way, adjudicate in this context means to make a formal decision or a judgment about a problem or something under dispute. And this contract change control system is, of course, part of our integrated change control system. It defines how changes are documented, tracked, approved, or even if there is an approval required. For example, you may have a clause in the contract that says scope changes that result in a less than 5 hours of work per incident must be tracked, documented, and then communicated to the change control board, but they require no actual approval by the board. Most contracts, however, will have to be changed in some way at some time. For instance, a milestone may have to be adjusted, or the scope changes, or the schedule needs changing, or any of the other 500 items that are described in your contract are updated somehow. And since changes are inevitable, you should have a clear process in place that defines how to go about to change your contract. And at some point in your control procurement's process, you also have to pay your seller. So our next controlling tool and technique is the payment systems. In most companies, this will be part of your financial division, usually the accounts payable department. If your project is large enough, you may even have your own accounts payable department for the duration of the project. The payment system usually includes some kind of review by the project management team. For instance, the project management team will review the invoices that the sellers send to ensure that they are correct. And if you look at this from the contractual point of view, paying the invoices on time is one of the agreements that you as the buyer have entered into with the contract. And a functioning payment system is your best insurance to comply with these kinds of agreements. Claims are another item that may come up, and for this we have the controlling tool and technique called claims administration, which you can use to resolve disputes on your project. On a large project, contracts and scope can be pretty complex. You may run into disagreement with your seller. For instance, to you it was obvious that the engine needed to run on regular gas, but the seller assumed it must be diesel. Now, is that a change? And most importantly, who is going to pay for it? Or, as another example, a change that looks small to you is not so small according to the seller and will cost thousands. Claims administration is the process of processing, adjudicating, and communicating contract claims. You will do this by following the documented procedures in your project. Let's move on to the records management system, which we also grouped into the controlling side of our tools and technique. The PMBOK Guide 5th edition describes records management systems as a specific set of processes related to control functions and tools that are consolidated and combined to record and retain information about the project. This system will help you to, well, manage your records, your contract records, to be precise in this particular process here. It allows you to file and retrieve all contract documentation, including, for instance, your correspondence. Quite often, this is part of your PMIS, the Project Management Information System, which manages all the documents of your project. So now that we have reviewed all the tools and techniques in the control procurements process, let's take a look at the kind of results that we can expect when we apply our tools and techniques. I have 4 examples for you here. So the first action that we may need to take is we may need to update our contract through the contract change control system. And of course, as a result of this possible need to update the contract, we will need to issue a change request. Next, we process payments through our payment system. And of course, as the result, we will have paid invoices. We also talked about the claims administration. Here we document the claims. This means we get correspondence, and in the end we will also and hopefully have a resolution of the claim or dispute. And lastly, we also will be updating various documents and receiving various documents, correspondence for instance, that we store in our records management system. And the result of this is, of course, we will have the updated documents available to us in our lessons learned databases. And from here, from these 4 examples, you can now make the transition over to the outputs of the control procurements process. So we have the following outputs of our process: work performance information, change requests, project management plan updates, project documents updates, and organizational process assets updates. The work performance information, it's straightforward, like seller performance reports, warranties, all the results from contract-related inspections. The same with the project documents updates. They're also quite simple. Any procurement schedules or technical documentation that needs to be updated falls under this category. So we will not be looking at the work performance information or the project documents updates in detail, but let's take a look at the other 3. Whenever you administer and inspect, you will inevitably have changes popping up. Sometimes this causes problems. As in any other process, changes are always implemented through your project's integrated change control system. There are no exceptions to this. In the case where we have a buyer-seller relationship, such changes may later on lead to disputes. This means that all changes must be appropriately documented as well as communicated to the other party as well. In some cases, this may lead to change requests that did not get implemented because there is a dispute still going on about the change. And when we talk about any updates to the project management plan, we usually don't update the project management plan itself, but we think about updating subsidiary documents that are inside of our project management plan. In particular, here we may be updating the procurement management plan through change requests, obviously, in case we notice that some of the processes of how we manage our procurements aren't quite working out the way we had expected them to. And then we may also be updating the schedule baseline, of course, again, through change requests based on performance reviews that we have seen, for instance, on how the seller is doing. And we may also be updating delivery dates in the future, or we may be changing milestone dates in our baseline. There are 3 types of updates to the organizational process assets in the control procurements process that you should be aware of. First, we have correspondence. Any kind of correspondence in regards to the procurement you want to keep as part of your organizational process assets, simply in case of a dispute. Second, we have the payment schedules and payment requests. Remember what we said earlier about the payment system. Most of the time, this is external to your project, so you will have to give your accounts payable a payment schedule, and you must also request that they now pay the invoices that have come in. If you have your own payment system in place for the project, you will have people on your own team working on it. You probably don't need to actually request it for them. They will simply go ahead and pay out according to the contract and invoices. And the third update to the organizational process assets is the seller performance evaluation documentation. This documents how well the seller has performed on your current project, on your current procurement, so that your information can be used as input for future projects, future procurements, when we are maybe going to use that same seller again. Let's review. Control procurements is a continuous and iterative process. This is not something that you do once and then forget. Both the buyer and the seller are responsible for ensuring that both sides meet their contractual obligations and that their own legal rights are protected. The control procurements process ensures that the seller's performance meets contractual requirements and that the buyer performs according to the terms of the contract. And that pretty much sums it up. But before we go, here is a quick PMP exam tip for you with regards to certain assumptions that you can make when answering PMP exam sample questions. First of all, as project managers, we should always perform a make or buy analysis to determine if we actually need to go outside of our project's organization. So anything that we need to deliver on our project, we have to think it through and say, are we going to make this or are we going to buy this? The make or buy decision is mandatory. Second, it's always important to ensure that the terms of any contract entered into on your project are always met and that the deliverables meet the quality requirements that are specified in the contract. And then third and final, always remember that if something is not specified, not specifically stated in the contract, well, then the seller doesn't have to do it because it wasn't stated in the contract. And this concludes our look at the control procurements process. So Justine and I say goodbye. Well, to be precise, Justine says,
Toodle pip.
And I say, until next time.